Can you solve these equations? So what numbers, when you square them, give themselves? What numbers, when you cube them, give themselves? And if you're feeling clever, and I do feel clever, then what numbers, when you do them to the power of 4, give themselves? Now you might spot that for the first one, if you do 1 squared, that gives 1. And 0 squared is also 0. And in fact, they are the only two solutions. But how can you be sure those are the only solutions? Well, you need to properly solve the equation to be absolutely sure that we've found all the solutions. So for the first question, you need to get 0 on one side. So if you subtract x from both sides, you get this. And then you factorise that equation. So you factorise out the x because it's common to x squared and x. And you get x brackets x minus 1 equals 0. Now, if you have two things multiplied together to give 0, then at least one of those numbers has to be 0, because 0 times anything is 0. Now, if it's the x that's 0, you get x equals 0 as a solution. And if the x minus 1 is 0, then x would be 1. So that gives us the solutions that we expect. What about the second one, x cubed equals x? Now, you might spot it that, well, 1 cubed gives you 1. 0 cubed is also 0. But you might have missed the fact that when you do minus 1 cubed, minus 1 times minus 1 times minus 1, that gives you minus 1. So that's actually a third solution. Now, how do we solve this? Well, again, we subtract x from both sides to get 0 on one side. Then we factorise out the x to get you this. And then you might spot that x squared minus 1 is the difference of two squares. So we can factorise that as x plus 1, x minus 1 equals 0. And again, we've got the product of three things is equal to 0. So if this x is 0, we get 0 as a solution. If the x plus 1 is 0, then we get x is minus 1 as a solution. And if x minus 1 is 0, you get x is 1 as a solution. So that gives you the three solutions we expect again. Now, what about this one? X to the 4 is equal to x. This is a bit harder, but we can factorise it in the same way. So we need to subtract x from both sides, as before. Then we factorise out the x, like this. And then we've got to factorise the x cubed minus 1. Now, this one's harder to factorise, but you can factorise it using x minus 1 times x squared plus x plus 1. And that is equal to 0, as before. So if the x is 0, you get x is equal to 0. And that indeed works because 0 to the power of 4 is equal to 0. Or if the x minus 1 is 0, then you get x is 1. And again, that works because 1 to the power of 4 is equal to 1. Or you get this quadratic is equal to 0. So if I write that down here. Now, this doesn't factorise, so we have to use the quadratic formula to solve this. And remember how the quadratic formula works. If I put a 1 here and a 1 here, the a is the 1, the b is 1, and the c is also 1. And the quadratic formula is this. X is equal to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So if we substitute our numbers in, we get minus 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus 4 times 1 times 1 all over 2 times 1. So that gives us minus 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 3 over 2. Now we can write the square root of minus 3 as the square root of 3 times the square root of minus 1, like this. And the square root of minus 1, we have a special symbol for that. It's an imaginary number. It is I. So it's minus 1 plus or minus root 3i all over 2. And that gives us the final two solutions for that equation.